Hi there. I'm Mike Capus, Senior Manager in KPMG's Management Consulting practice. I work predominantly with public sector and nonprofit organizations to help them grow, transform, and adapt to a changing environment. As part of our KPMG Community Leader Strategy, we've been helping social purpose organizations through LIFT for a couple of years now, and wanted to talk a bit about building a plan today. So what is a business plan? Well, a business plan is a formal document that outlines who you are as an organization, what you do, and how you know you'll be successful. It's often the first step before starting a new venture or a way for already operating your organization to stop and think about what it is doing and whether a new direction is needed. A good practice for business planning is getting in the habit of refreshing and revisiting it annually. It ensures that you stay relevant and responsive to the results and your community's needs as well. So we'll talk a bit about what business planning is and what our approach would be that we would suggest for you to take. But first, why is planning important? Well, there's a number of reasons. We've got 6 up on the slide here for you. The first is that it provides an opportunity to test out and see actually if your idea holds promise of success. It really gives you an opportunity to say, is this a go or no-go opportunity for us or for our organization? It also gives you an opportunity to make a clear statement about your mission and your vision. Helps you to communicate your purpose both to funders and to stakeholders. It gives you a blueprint that you can use to focus your effort and keep your organization on track. What that means is that it's a document that everyone can use. You're all singing from the same song sheet. It provides you with an ability to have a thoughtful view of your industry or sector, including the opportunities and threats that may be affecting it. These are things like macro factors and megatrends. Megatrends is one of those fun consulting terms that we like to use, but it's really about the dynamics that are shaping your industry. Business planning also gives you an honest assessment of your strengths and weaknesses. It actually lets you think introspectively, so thinking about your own strengths and weaknesses. It also gives you a clear and understandable description of your operating model or how you plan to deliver services and keep the lights on. At the same time, it gives you a chance to rethink your operations. This is something that a lot of organizations don't actually have an opportunity to do. So this is a good way to sort of rethink how you can deliver yourself differently and how you can create new benefits for your organization. In developing a business plan, there's a number of elements that you should consider. And we've got sort of the 4 elements here. We like this 4-element approach, but you can adapt each of these to your needs and the scale of your organization. The first element is around external forces. So what are the external factors that could impact or influence our idea or our organization? The second is the business model. Who are we? Why do we exist? And what do we want to be known for? Really asking the questions of the who and the why. The third element is the operating model. So what will we do or offer? And how will we do this? Really then getting into the what and the how. And lastly, in terms of measuring results, really understanding how will we know when we've been successful in achieving our desired results. So what measures are we going to have in place to tell us whether we've been successful or not? So we'll explore each of these 4 areas in a bit more detail in the subsequent slides. So the first step is considering the external forces. Before getting into a plan itself, it's important really to understand the context of your organization and also the factors outside of it. There may be things that will affect your organization that need to be front and center in your plan, and so it's a good opportunity to just sort of stop and think for a moment. We consider leveraging a framework, and frameworks are good because they allow you to consider the various internal and external forces that may affect your organization and give you a good starting point, so it gives you something to work from. Our experience has shown that 2 of the frameworks that we like using, SWOT and PESTLE, we like acronyms in consulting, are good analysis frameworks that provide you a foundation. They're just ways to help you think about all of the elements that you should consider when you're thinking about the internal and external factors. Now let's spend some time talking about what each of those SWOT and PESTLE analysis actually asks you to look for. So SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. From a strengths perspective, it really asks you to consider, what are we good at? What are we known for? What are the things that people look at us as a leader in our field? From a weaknesses perspective, what could we be better at? What don't we do so well? And, where are our challenges and our issue areas and our problem areas? From an opportunities perspective, where is there room for us to grow? Where could we, potentially move into new areas or serve new people or offer new services? Those are really the internal factors that you want to consider from the SWOT perspective. Then the T, the threats, really asks you to think about externally. So where are we being challenged by others? Are there others that do a better job than we do at our social purpose? Are there other organizations or other things that are going to jeopardize our ability to continue? Strengths and weaknesses, the S and the W, ask you to reflect on your past successes and struggles, while considering the O and the T, the opportunities and threats, may identify new focus areas for your organization. Threats aren't only something that will jeopardize your ability to deliver, but they actually present potentially opportunities too for you to exploit. Okay, on the pestle side, P-E-S-T-L-E. So, P is political. What are the government influences that will affect us? Are there changes in policies planned by our federal, our local, or our provincial governments that may affect how we operate? Economic asks you to consider what are the economic factors that will affect us. One of the good ones that I like to think about is, do donors have money to give, or are times tough? As that really affects a lot of social purpose organizations. S is around the social factors. What are the cultural and demographic trends that will affect us? So will changes in demography actually affect who we serve? Think about aging populations. If you're a senior social purpose organization, you're definitely going to have greater demands in the near future, given the aging population that we have around the world. T is for technology. What innovations in technology will affect us? This is not only about considering, do we have the latest and greatest technologies, but what are the other things that we need to consider? If you're a social purpose organization that serves people with disabilities, you might want to consider leading practices in adaptive technologies, or the use of things like iPads to actually provide sort of training and skills to people with disabilities. L, it represents legislative. So what laws will affect us? When you think about this, think about, are there changes to Canada Revenue Agency, to charities, or to other factors, other laws and regulations that may actually impact our operations or our ability to deliver? And lastly, E is for environmental. And this is really about what environmental considerations do we need to make. This isn't always pertinent to a lot of social purpose organizations, but you can consider things in this like, do we need to consider our carbon footprint in the way that we deliver? Do we need to reduce the amount of garbage or waste that we create as well? That may present new ways to look at your organization. So, after exploring the external forces, the first element, it's time to think about why your organization exists. A business model is a way to do that. A business model describes the rationale of why an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. When we talk about value here, it's really the results or the social impact that you're making in your community. Starting with this element of your plan helps you to understand both who you are and why you exist. And it also provides you a solid base of those foundational elements before getting into the other elements of the what and the how of your organization. It really starts to form the base for your overall plan. In creating a business model, you want to consider what your vision is, what outcomes you want to achieve, and who you want to serve. And we'll spend a bit of time talking about these three elements. The first step is defining who you are is really what you want to achieve, and that's done by defining your vision. Your vision asks you to consider what your long-term goal is for your organization. So ask yourselves, what is our ambition and what do we want to achieve? Defining your vision is really about blue sky thinking. It's about thinking about and trying to define what an ideal, good future could look like for your organization. In some cases, we want to say an impossibly good future, but we know that we have to have some realism to our vision statements as well. So what makes a good vision statement? Well, vision statements should be simple, straightforward, and concise. They should reflect where you ideally want to get to, but also be realistic. And if you know you can't achieve what you've defined, then you probably need to start again. For example, if you know homelessness can't be ended in 2 years, then don't make that part of your statement. And simplicity is key. Some organizations have several page documents outlining their vision, and that's great. It's fantastic that they were able to think that broadly. But from a stakeholder perspective, from a funder perspective, that's a lot to get through. And after the first paragraph, the meaning of your organization may be lost. At the same time, you need to think about the language that you're going to use in your vision statement and how that will resonate with your stakeholders and funders. If someone can't understand who you are within a few seconds of hearing or reading your organization's vision, it's probably too complex. Language is really important. What do you want your audience to do, say, think, feel after they've read the statement? Think about that as your guiding principle for it. Alrighty, so after defining your vision, the next task is defining your outcomes. This really asks your organization to define what success looks like for those that will be served by your organization. It's also a way to demonstrate to stakeholders what your social purpose is. So what are the things that you're going to achieve as a result of doing the things that you do? Outcomes are really the byproduct of the work that you do. They're created as a result of the inputs leading to activities and the outputs of your organization. And they really need to work and align with your vision and your mission. They can be defined by the time horizon as well in which they're realized. So you might have immediate, intermediate, or longer-term outcomes to consider. Some examples of outcomes are on the right-hand side of the slide there. So employed, well-being, healthy, safe included are examples of things that social purpose organizations tend to work towards. Funders are more concerned with outcomes these days than they have been for many, many moons. So consider the guiding outcomes that a funder may provide to you, or the ones in your local, provincial government's social policy frameworks. Often, these provide a good place to consider what you are trying to achieve, and actually are reflective of what society is looking for as well. The last step in defining your business model is actually defining who you're going to serve, so defining your clients. This asks you to consider who the recipients will be of the work that you undertake to achieve your outcomes and your vision. So if you think back a couple of slides ago, we talked about the linkage between clients leading to achievement of outcomes, leading to the achievement of your vision. So it's really the driving force behind that. Clients can be defined and should be defined by their age, their need, and other demographic characteristics. So for example, children with disabilities would be a specific type of client that an organization may serve. However, you need to balance the amount of detail that you put into defining your clients. You need to be clear enough on who you serve, but not so restrictive in that it limits your ability to achieve your outcomes and visions. In doing this, one of the things that you might want to consider are some of the threats from the SWOT analysis that you did. Think about how other organizations may be serving the same population. Are the other organizations serving it in a complementary manner, so you're doing things collectively and in partnership, or are they duplicating potentially what you are looking to do? And if they are, what are the implications of that? It's important to consider, especially in an era of limited financial resources, not duplicating resources to serve similar clients to achieve similar outcomes. Once you've defined the who and why, so your business model, you can move on to define the what and the how, your operating model. An operating model is really the manifestation of your organization's strategy. It's really about making explicit choices about the best deployment of a number of interrelated elements to achieve your goals. So what that means is that we're just breaking things down into a number of different components. And it's about saying, how do we want to organize ourselves against each of these 5 components? And you see those 5 components listed on the left-hand side there. So services, functions, and processes, organization and governance, technology, partnerships, locations, and infrastructure, and people and skills. Ultimately, an operating model describes how you will operate across those domains in order to deliver the value that you've defined in your business model, so to achieve the outcomes and the vision of what you've set out. It is really the delivery vehicle of your business model. So whereas the business model is the who and the why, your operating model is the what and the how. It is really how you can serve the clients and achieve the results and vision which you laid out. In doing this, in defining an operating model, we also need to consider the results from our work on external forces as well as the business model, and considering those factors when we break it down into the 5 key elements. So the first element around services, functions, and processes in our operating model. And some key questions that you want to consider are, what will we offer to each client to help achieve these outcomes and meet their needs? So what are the tangible service offerings and or programs that we're going to be planning to offer to everyone that we serve? What are the most effective ways to reach our target clients? Another important question. Are we just delivering services in person? Are we going to consider online services? Or are there other mediums that work well for our target clients? And then lastly, how do we actually get the work done? So what are the key functions and the processes that will enable this to happen? Do we need things like case management? Do we need functions like finance? Do we need processes like resource or fund development to keep us sustainable and in business? The second element is organization and governance. Some of the key questions that you want to consider in this is, what is our governance model? What is our board composition? How many committees do we have and what's their purpose? Are there other advisory bodies that we need to be considering to help inform what we do? Another question, what does our organizational structure look like? What are the key roles involved? So when you think about the organizational structure, how many people? What are the levels? If you start off with a CEO or executive director, how do you organize underneath that? And you really want to consider the work that you've done under number 1, under the functions and processes, because that will really drive who you need and what you need. The third element in the operating model that you want to consider is technology. So this is really about defining, what technology do we require? What did we learn from the PESTEL analysis around technological advances or innovations that we should be considering? The fourth element of the operating model is around partnerships, locations, and infrastructure. So who will we work with and how will we work with them? What are all the variety of partners that we want to establish with in order to serve our social purpose? Where will we be located? So this may mean multiple locations, it may mean single locations. And lastly, what kind of physical infrastructure do we require? Do we need a building? Do we need a house? Do we need open space? Do we need a warehouse? The last element of the operating model to consider is people and skills. So what are our core competencies? These are things like social work, leadership, analytical skills, entrepreneurship. So think about the competencies that you need in your organization and really use that, leveraging it from the outcomes that you want to achieve, the vision, the types of clients you want to serve, and the other work that you've done prior to getting to this stage. And then lastly, what are the skills and abilities needed to achieve our vision? This is also important to think about from an outcome perspective as well. If you're a social purpose organization and one of your outcomes is around employment, you need some skills and abilities around employment development, employment training. If you don't have that, you're not going to be very successful at achieving those desired results. So the last element in developing a business plan is really determining how you will measure results. And defining how you will measure results really starts by understanding the relationships between the actions of your organizations and the outcomes that you want to achieve. There's a thing called the theory of change, and it's one of the ways to do this. And what the theory of change is it's an approach you can take to help define the building blocks required to bring about your long-term goals. What it does is it asks you to think about the set of connected building blocks. often referred to as outcomes, results, accomplishments, or preconditions, and depicts them in a map, like the one that you see at the top of the slide. This is really about linking what you do to the outcomes that you want to achieve. And causally linking these things together gives you and your funders a better understanding of the manner in which results will be achieved. Defining how you will measure results starts with the outcomes that you identified during your definition of them in the business model section. So for each of those outcomes, what the theory of change asks you to do and the approach that you should take is working backwards to identify what preconditions or requirements need to be in place in order for you to realize your stated outcomes. And you'll continue to work backwards and build those connections, leading to something that looks a bit like a process map. So this leads to that, leads to that. There's an example on the bottom of the slide there. So if you focus on the right-hand box, if we think about the long-term outcome of an organization being improved long-term employment rates for a vulnerable population, what is the precondition that has to be in place before you get there? So a vulnerable population has marketable skills. If a vulnerable population has marketable skills, then ultimately there should be longer-term employment rates for that vulnerable population. And in order to have marketable skills, you need to actually have people doing internships, so actually getting some skills in the workplace. So that's a precondition. Shows you how to think about an example for one of those things. There's lots of examples and resources online that'll actually help you out with this thinking as well. So you'll continue to work backwards in that form until you can connect the work being done by your organization directly to one of your preconditions or requirements. So it's really that causal linkage that we talked about earlier. So in the example that we showed you, the work that the organization is doing is the person attends a training session put on by the organization. That then leads to that vulnerable population being placed in internships, which leads to marketable skills, which leads to an improvement in long-term employment rates for the vulnerable population. When you're doing this work, the other thing that's important to do is to also note down any basic assumptions that you make, and that's just so that everyone can be aware of those. Assumptions are really key for a couple of reasons, but one of them is to know why results aren't being achieved if they aren't. So it's the ability to go back and be reflective about what kind of assumptions did we make if we're not achieving the results that we thought we were going to achieve. The last step after you've defined that sort of value chain is really to go back and consider, how am I going to measure? What are the indicators and measures that I can use to assess the performance against each of those outcomes and the work that I directly do? So for each of the outcomes and preconditions, we should have a measure. So if you think back to the previous slide, we can measure long-term employment rates as the percentage of long-term employment for vulnerable populations. We can measure the marketable skills as the percentage of people who develop marketable skills. We can measure the placement in internships as the number of people who have internships. And we can measure the number of persons attending the training sessions put on by our organization. So you want to identify what the measures are for each of those. But you also want to make sure that you can measure those with reliable, accessible, and understandable data. So reliable is that there's trust and credibility in the information that you're using to report on. Accessibility is that it's easy to access and measure. You don't want to create complicated measurement systems that require a lot of resources to actually measure. And the last bit is around understandable. This is to make sure that things can be easily explained to your stakeholders and your funders as well. Lastly, you're going to use that information then to generate and create a dashboard view or a scorecard that you can use with your stakeholders and funders to demonstrate progress. You can use that to monitor your progress over time, but you can also use it to continuously improve your services as well. So, after doing all of the work together on all of the elements, they all get brought together to form your plan. And this page really speaks to the 4 elements being brought together. This information and all the information that you've done on it can now be used to build out a list of initiatives for the next few years, and also helps you to identify the roadmap for your future. It also gives funders and other stakeholders a better view of who you are and what you do, and also how you're going to measure the results. At the same time, it's also important to consider all of these things and go back and regularly revisit and refresh the elements of your plan so that you stay both attuned to influencing factors and also your results. So with that being said, good luck and happy planning.